Hello, everyone. My name is Stephanie Boozer. I'm happy to welcome you to today's CUGC Connect with ControlUp. We're going to be getting a look at their new automation platform and some troubleshooting and optimization for your Citrix user experience. So before we get into that today, I'd like to introduce who's on the call with us. We have Jenny Sheeran. She is a Tampa CUGC leader and a CTA, and you can follow her on Twitter at Jen Sheeran. Jenny's going to take a look at the questions for us. She is going to keep an eye on them as you type them in. Our presenters have agreed to take questions throughout the webinar today, so we'll try to take as many as we can as they make sense during the presentation. So please type those in. If we can't get to all of them during the demos and the presentation, we'll hopefully have time at the end. Jenny, would you like to say hello to everyone?
Hello, everyone. Welcome and look forward to your questions.
Thank you. All right, so let's get to it. We have Yoni Avital with us. He is co-founder and CTO of ControlUp. He's done several webinars with CUGC in the past, and so we're excited to welcome him back today. And also with him is Trent Tai, or Trent. He is a technical specialist and a CTP at ControlUp. So I'm going to hand things over to their capable hands. They're going to get us going. I think, Yoni, you're first up, so I will send you the screen right now.
Great. Hey guys, really excited to be here today for this CUGC webinar. I want to thank the CUGC team for arranging this. We have a great audience. Really, lots of people are joining, which is awesome to see. And I think you're joining for good reason. We're showing for probably the first time we're doing a deep dive session into our new automation platform. Probably one of the most highly anticipated features in ControlUp. So it's going to be great. Trent has joined me, and I would like to extend a special welcome to him. Trent will cover the second part of this webinar, doing some interesting deep dive live demos on the automation platform. So let's have a quick look on the agenda here. So those of us who know ControlUp will not be surprised. We're leaving most of the time for live demos, which I think is the best way to showcase a new feature. We'll start with a quick slide just for newcomers to have a high-level overview of what ControlUp is about, and then we'll dive into the new things we have in 7.4. So stay tuned. Okay, so ControlUp, by now I think most of the audience have heard about us. We have been there for a while now in the end-user computing space. The company is growing rapidly, which is great news for us, and I think also for our existing customers and prospects. Headquarters in San Jose, our engineering in Israel, and you can see some of the other stats on screen. ControlUp focuses on a few major use cases. So obviously monitoring end-user computing environments. We cover Citrix as well as some of the other VDI platforms out there. We also have very good integrations with all the major players in the virtualization space, whether it's leading virtualization solutions in the on-prem data centers and also the upcoming public cloud players we see. But ControlUp was always more than monitoring. We provide troubleshooting, we provide analytics, and we always had a pretty major mediation feature set in hand. And I think that now with 7.4, we really enhanced the remediation part. Now that you guys can actually automate some of the common and more advanced use cases, and that will be the major part of this webinar. We're growing, which means new customers. You can see some of the logos here. Really happy to share with you some of the big names we have added in 2018, whether it's AT&T or Best Buy or Costco. You can see the names here. It's really great, and we look forward to keep increasing our customer count in 2019. Okay, so as promised, we'll dive right in. So in this first part of the live demo, I'm going to cover the new features in 7.4. The first one is an enhancement to a really great virtual expert engine. We'll cover that first. Then we'll dive into the user experience metrics we've added in 7.4. I think we're one of the first vendors to integrate them, and they're really great, so stay tuned for that. And then we'll reach the automation engine part. Okay, so let's start with the new 7.4 features. Okay, so you guys should see on screen right now ControlUp's 7.4. This is the beta release. We are supposed to start the public beta early next week on Monday. So if you're part of the beta community, you'll just get an email with the links and everything. If you want to join the beta and test drive 7.4, just send an email to support@controlup.com and ask to be added to the beta community. Okay, so let's start with Virtual Expert. So if you've played with ControlUp before, you have seen Virtual Expert. It's something we're enhancing, and that was actually introduced in ControlUp 7.2. And essentially, it's a system that makes troubleshooting much more intuitive. Okay, so in this case, you can see a hypervisor with high I/O usage. The Virtual Expert allowed you in previous version to actually suggest you where to navigate in order to find the root cause of a performance issue. Okay, we received great feedback from customers about this. It made troubleshooting much easier, and we keep enhancing the rules behind this engine. Okay, so this is Virtual Expert pre 7.4. Now, what we did in 7.4, we actually enhanced the Virtual Expert engine to cover, besides covering navigation rules, we are now also suggesting script actions for either remediation or extended troubleshooting. And let me explain what this means. So most of you have heard about script-based actions. We actually rebranded this to script action in 7.4. Script actions are essentially extensions to ControlUp in the form of scripts. This can be PowerShell, VB, or Bash scripts, which can be downloaded from the community section of ControlUp and used against the relevant ControlUp resources, whether it's sessions, VMs, hosts, etc. Now, what you see on screen right now, this is the community script. This is where ControlUp customers can browse and download pre-existing scripts. Prior to 7.4, we have made the huge investments in adding a really big set of relevant PowerShell scripts for the library. Okay, we're actually using some pretty well-known experts, guys from the CDP community, from the CTA community, from Microsoft MVPs, VMware vExperts, and I think we added something like 50 or 100 scripts in the last couple of months. And in a sec, you will see why this is really relevant for the 7.4 suggested script actions feature. Okay, and obviously, customers can create their own scripts, whether by importing existing ones or just creating them from scratch in here. Okay, so prior to 7.4, customers had to manually download the script action, and besides that, they had to manually kind of guess or learn from the community or from our knowledge center or from webinars which script makes sense for which ControlUp column, preset, or metric. This is all changed in 7.4. Okay, so let's look on the new Virtual Expert setting page. What you see on screen right now, this is where customers can configure Virtual Expert suggestion rules. Okay, so this section here, contextual navigation, this is in existence before 7.4. This is where you can configure additional drill down suggestions for your ControlUp users. Script action rules, this is new in 7.4. So what's happening here is essentially the rules behind the engine I will show in a sec, which tells ControlUp which script to suggest based on the relevant column you select in the grid. Now, you will notice we have essentially two types of rules. One is community-based and one is internal. Okay, now the work we did behind the scenes in the last couple of months, we have actually configured hundreds of community rules which are automatically propagated to all ControlUp customers in order to make these features much more, basically baked from day one. And we are going to continue and enhance the suggestion engine while we work on additional features. And obviously, customers can add their own rules via this user interface. Okay, so now that we've seen how it's configured behind the scene, let's see a few examples. Okay, so we'll start with the sessions view. Let's look, for example, on logon duration. Okay, so slow logons are very common issues in VDI environments. You will notice the blue lines in here. This means that we have suggestions for running script on this specific cell. And when I click on this specific blue lines, you can see the suggestions in here. Okay, so this is the new suggestion engine in 7.4. And I do want to highlight a few things in here. So here you will see all the suggestions that are pre-configured from the cloud or suggestions that you guys added internally. In addition, and this is a major enhancement to the engine, we are now listing suggestions which are not necessarily downloaded to your organization. Okay, so you can see, for example, that analyze logon duration, it's with the regular icon, which means that I can just click on that and run this script against this specific user session. But for example, list redirected user folders has the cloud icon, which means we have to download it before we can actually run it. Now, this is completely streamlined. Okay, so I can go ahead and click on one of the suggestions, and ControlUp will ask me if I want to download it automatically. This will happen in the background, and once it's ready, it will actually launch the script against the specific cell we highlighted a few seconds ago. Okay, so a lot of efforts into streamlining this new script action suggestion engine. Okay, we'll let it finish in the background. And I do want to share with you a few other examples. Let's look on bandwidth limit, for example. Okay, sorry, bandwidth last. So this is where we can see in real time how much bandwidth each remote session is consuming. And again, we have the graphical indication here. We can click on that. No, sorry, the script just ran. You can click on that again. And here we can see the specific suggestions for the bandwidth last metric. Okay, in this case, we are offering customers to run either PCOIP or HDX bandwidth script, which will allow you to see which specific channel is currently consuming bandwidth for that session. Okay, so these are nice examples for getting additional troubleshooting data by using scripts against specific metrics. Okay, there is one other example I want to show you guys, which is pretty interesting. So processes, this is where we can see all live processes with the respective metrics. And we can look, for example, on one of the IO related metrics. We can click here on the suggestion, the virtual expert indication, and here we can see the suggested scripts for this specific metric. And here we see now one of the more advanced scripts we prepared for this upcoming feature, which essentially enable customers to run Procmon in the background for this specific process, sample file access patterns, and then the output will actually show which files are actually generating IO, and the same is true for network destinations. Okay, so you can think about this feature as essentially, being consisted of two parts. One is the suggestion engine itself, which is comprised from rules and the graphical indications, and the other one is the content, which is the actual the script library, which can be used in your organization by downloading community scripts or creating your own scripts. Okay, another nice example I want to show you guys here is in regards to computer free space. Let's look on this metric here, and I want to show one thing which you might have noticed so far. So you can see here we have the free space on system drive metric. You can see there is a difference in the graphical indication for the virtual expert engine, right? So as long as we consider the metric to be above the thresholds, the indication will appear, but it will be gray. Okay, so it's there. You do that for running maintenance related scripts, but if the cell is actually crossing the yellow or red thresholds, we have a different, more, I guess, clear indication, which is this blue indication here. And then you can go ahead, click on that, and run the relevant scripts for this specific metric. Okay, so kind of like summarize, the new script suggestion engine in 7.4 allows you to intuitively run script actions against relevant metrics without any preparations or background knowledge. We will just automatically suggest the most relevant scripts, and this is a live system. We keep enhancing the scripts, the rules, optimizing them, and adding them as time goes by. And one last point regarding this feature is something which I think will make sense for a lot of customers. You guys can use that with your own internal rules and think about this as a great way to actually make running internal scripts much more intuitive for tier 1 teams when they encounter common issues in your environment, right? So let's say you guys have an app which might have a common issue where it's hanging with high CPU due to multiple files in the temp folder. You guys probably have a script for that, and now with the new script suggestion engine rule, you can actually promote that to your tier 1 team by using this engine here. It makes it much more intuitive to run when we actually meet the relevant criteria. Okay, so I want to move on to the next, the second big feature in 7.4, and that's the new user experience metrics. So let me focus on this specific folder here. Here we have this is essentially an RDS8 server 2019, and you guys can notice here some of the existing user experience metrics we have in ControlUp's. So you guys are probably familiar with most of them, whether it's the logon duration metric, application load time, etc. Now, one of the, these are great metrics. They can reliably tell things about user experience in regards to the initial logon duration and how long it takes to actually launch apps on a Windows desktop. But one of the drawbacks here is these are essentially static metrics, right? So they happen once in a while. For logon duration, something that happens once during the session initialization, and app load time is something which happens anytime we launch a relevant app. The new addition in 7.4 is the user input delay metric, which is a new metric Microsoft has added in the newest OSs. And it's one of the best UX metrics I've seen, and that's why we decided to integrate this in 7.4. So let me quickly explain what's happening behind the scene for the user input delay metric. So let's see. So Microsoft has a great article about this new performance metric called user input delay, and I'll try to summarize it real quick. So essentially, what the user input delay metric is all about is how long it takes in milliseconds for an application to process a user input request. Okay, so user input request is obviously a keyboard stroke or mouse click, and the metric will show how long it took in milliseconds for the process or user mode application to actually acknowledge the input and process it. So it's great because it's agnostic to remoting protocols, to pretty much everything, and so it's working for all VDI solutions and any app essentially. And B, it's a very direct way to understand user experience. Because if you click on a keyboard button, right, on a mouse click, the time it takes for the app to respond and actually draw the relevant output is exactly what the user is feeling and describing as user experience. So these are the new metrics we integrated in 7.4. We have them for the computer, session, and process layers. And let me show you a quick example or a demo of how this can visualize user experience in real time. So let me, okay, so this is a live session against the same server we're just monitoring in here. Let's minimize this area here. So we can see the user input delay being displayed on screen. And let's go ahead and open a pretty big Adobe-based 3D module. Okay, so this will take a while. While we're doing this, I'm going to drill down in here so we can see the process data we have in ControlUp's. So what you see here, let me just scroll to the right here. So what we see here, essentially, we see all the processes running inside my user session with the respective user input delay metric. Okay, so in a few more seconds, the 3D model will be up and running, and I'm going to play with it so we can actually see how in real time, the app is responding and how it's being visualized in ControlUp's. So you can see I'm moving the model here, It's pretty CPU intensive. You can see CPU for this specific process is nearing the 50%, which is pretty big, and you can see the user input delay in milliseconds in real time. So that's, to me, a great way to visualize exactly what the user is feeling in a continuous way. This is obviously integrated with all the regular ControlUp features, alerting, triggers, so you guys can get a real-time notification if someone has experienced a really major delay. And overall, I think it's a really great addition to our user experience monitoring in 7.4. Okay, so just before moving on to the next part, any questions regarding the two previous features we just covered? I'll take that as a no for now.
No, I think everyone's being really quiet.
Okay, which means they're basically amazed, so it's good.
Exactly, that's what I was going to say.
Okay, so let's move on to the main dish, Control Automation Engine. Okay, so before actually demoing the solution in the console, I want to give a quick high-level overview of how this engine actually works. Okay, so what we see on screen is obviously the ControlUp monitor service. This is an essential component in any ControlUp deployment. It's running at the customer site, and it's always connected to all the relevant data sources. So each and every VDI endpoint, RDS8 server, the vSphere, Citrix, Nutanix connections, everything is connected. Besides that, we have the ControlUp configuration database, which for all of our hybrid cloud customers is obviously hosted in the cloud. And we have our email notification web services we provide as part of the cloud service. Now, it's important to mention that as part of the configuration database, we have the triggers and the newly added ControlUp automation rules. Okay, so from a component perspective, what's playing here is the monitor service, the configuration database, which we have for each customer with all the rules, and obviously the agents running on the relevant endpoints. Okay, so let's look on a quick example. Let's say we have an automation, trigger automation in place. Let's take a simple example. We're looking on free space on system drive, and if it drops below 5%, we have a trigger in place for that. So this has happened, right? One of the agents discovered that now the free space is less than 5%, and this triggered a ControlUp trigger and an automation rule. Okay, the automation rule in this case will include a script to go ahead and clean, for example, the C drive using Windows Updates cleanup or whatnot. So the monitor service in this case, besides publishing the incident triggers to the cloud for later analysis, it will also send a command to that specific agent to run the relevant PowerShell script and execute the remediation action. Once it's done, the agent will send back the script execution output to the monitor service, where we'll use it, assuming this is configured, to notify the user via email service about the script execution output. Okay, so very simple. Obviously there are more use cases, but just want to give this high-level overview so you guys will have a quick understanding of how this is working behind the scenes. And now let's see the first use case. Okay, so this is a pretty cool use case directly related to what we have seen in the previous section. Okay, so let's go back in here. So you guys might have noticed that the app is a bit slow, and that's pretty much related to CPU resources on the box. Okay, so this is how these things are working. User input is requesting CPU resources. If the CPU is really high, then we are competing with all other processes, and it can be pretty intense. So what we have in place here is a nice example of an automation rule that can actually automate user experience optimization in real time. So let's start with the script. So we have a script in place. It's called, let me see if I can find it. It's called set process priority to above normal. Okay, it's pretty simple. Essentially, it's doing the following. We get from ControlUp as a parameter the process ID, and then we simply increase the priority to above normal. Okay, a very simple Power script, which is mapped to the PID of the relevant process. That's pretty much it. That's the script. The other parts, the more, I guess, beefy part in this specific example is the trigger itself. So you see, this is currently disabled. This is obviously on purpose. We have a trigger called user experience process increase priority for business apps. Okay, this is essentially connected to the process record, obviously, and this is the condition of this specific trigger. Okay, so we're looking directly on the user input delay metric, and if it's crossing the 100 millisecond threshold for processes which meet these criteria, then we'll go ahead and actually run the script that we've just seen. Okay, so it's that simple. We have a trigger in place with the conditions, and we attach to this the relevant script we want to actually execute once we meet this criteria. Okay, and we can obviously also send the script execution output to email, but this is optional. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead now and enable the script so we can see it live, hopefully. The demo gods should be listening now. So we have now enabled this trigger. So what I'm going to do now, I'm actually going to reproduce the issue. So I'm going to make, the Adobe app consume or act up with pretty high user input delay, and then we'll see. We have, as you can see, one of the metrics we have running here in ControlUp or displayed here is the process priority. Okay, so let's start the test here. So I'm going to play with the 3D model, which is pretty intense. You will see the Adobe, you can see it in here right now on screen. You can see that the user input delay is higher than the threshold. Okay, so if everything is properly configured, in a matter of seconds, we will increase the priority. And there you go. The automation kicked in, and we increased dynamically the priority of the process based on this specific metric. And now, I have higher CPU usage and can play with the 3D model, and it will work much faster. Okay, so wow, that's great. Always see to see a live demo work during a webinar. So that's one, I think, pretty great example of how to use the ControlUp new automation platform to dynamically optimize user experience. And with that, I want to pass the torch to Trent, unless you guys want to cover something before.
We have some questions, Yanni, if you wanted to.
Yes, let's do one or two questions, and then we'll pass the torch to Trent for additional use cases.
One of the questions, can you show how an advanced script running would impact user input delay metric? That is, running a script to correct the metric in real time.
So actually, that's exactly what we just demoed, right? So assuming the user input delay is high due to lack of CPU resources, increases the process priority, will lower the user input delay. So it's exactly what we just showed.
And then another question was related to, from the ControlUp automation slide, I noticed the cloud APIs in the bottom left corner of the slide. Can ControlUp flag service degradation in Azure or AWS? If not, is that level of alerting functionality on the product roadmap?
Okay, good question. So indeed, the slide we're showing right now, it's future looking. 90% of what we're showing here on screen is already supported, including Amazon, AWS, and Citrix. The two upcoming features are Citrix Cloud API integration and Azure, and they should both happen this year. Okay, so I think this would be a great timing to pass make Trent the presenter so we can continue covering our really great automation platform.
Okay, I just sent the screen to you, Trent.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, let me find my screen to share. Okay, can you guys see this?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, hi everyone, I'm Trent, I'm a CTP, I'm a recent joinee for the ControlUp family, and I gotta say, as a previous ControlUp customer, this release is probably the most exciting release I've ever experienced. Going from version 3 to 4 was ginormous, and this feels like it's on that same level. So I'm really excited to be able to share with you some of these use cases that I found that ControlUp automation can kick in, and hopefully this starts triggering some thoughts in your brain as to how you can leverage this platform to help solve your problems and help make your environment smoother, faster, easier, and just make your life, much simpler and easier. So the first two use cases I'm going to talk about are metric-based automated actions. So Yoni actually showed you a demonstration of one with the user experience. This one is going to deal with some remediation. So I'm going to look at low disk space and how we can key in on some of the metrics that ControlUp has to actually clean up some of your temp files. And then another one I'm going to talk about, and this one is kind of near and dear to me, is custom disconnect and log off timers. Okay, so I'm going to start with the low disk space usage. Okay, so what I have is I've got a system here. I'm actually going to modify my columns so that way we can see this more visually. And what I have is I've got a trigger set up to monitor for my disk space utilization. And it's a computer record type that I'm triggering in on. And one of the things I'm looking for is that free space is less than or equal to 500 megabytes. So once we've crossed this threshold, we are going to run an action. And so I've already created an action, and it's called just delete temp files. And we can take a quick look at this script first. Okay, so again, it seems as I've been doing a lot of the automation stuff that you can make really simple scripts because ControlUp passes you all the parameters that you need for it. So what I have is I've got a folder on my D drive that's a temp folder, and within each one I'm going to look at all the files within there and just remove them, because once I've hit this low disk space threshold, we just want to clean out everything so that way our system is running as quickly as possible. No arguments are needed, as this is just running directly on the system. Okay, so now I'm going to generate my files. Okay, we can see ControlUp is updating. We're actually looking at 005 here, and he's now at 522 megabytes of free space, so he needs just a little bit more consumed to get over that hump. So I'm going to generate just another little file. All right, and now ControlUp is going to pick up that it's underneath that threshold, and now what will happen is the automated action will kick in, and we'll just see these files, boom, just disappear, just like that. And then immediately ControlUp brings us back to tell us that the minimum free drive space is now back up. And so immediately the issue has been remediated. If there was ever going to be a free space issue where, like print spoolers or temp files, if you're redirecting it to a persistent cache, like this solves that problem. So this is, I think, a really cool use case and a really simple one, and I think it highlights some of the power of this feature. My next use case is the Citrix, or not the Citrix, sorry, the timers. So one of the more interesting things as a Citrix admin that I've struggled with and that I've really want to do is I want to reduce the number of silos in my system. And one of my problems there is that there is one very, very special thing that makes me silo, and that is your idle and your disconnect timers. So the idle timer is how long a session's been idle before it switches to a disconnected state, and then the disconnected timer is how long a session has been in a disconnected state before it's logged off. And so the challenge there is that these are system level policies, so they apply to a whole virtual machine. And what we can do utilizing the ControlUp automation platform is we can actually key in on the metrics that ControlUp actually has already. And so we can key in on the state and the actual time that the user has been in there. And as long as it doesn't matter where they're running, they can be running on the same boxes and whatnot, and that allows them to actually execute some action. So we're going to take a look at some of my triggers here that I've configured for this one. So I've got my two applications that I've configured this for, and the first one is the disconnect timer. So how long has the session been idle for? And then we're going to move it into a disconnected state. So that way, if a user went for lunch or something, they can always come back in and they can reconnect into their existing session. Okay, so again, this is what these are the metrics that we're keying in on. So we're looking for idle time in minutes is greater than or equal to 20, and that the state is active. Active means that the screen is being remoted to them, but this is probably the more key one, that they've been idle for this particular amount of time, so 20 minutes. And then from there, I've got my log off timer as well. And so obviously these are two separate timers and you can configure them however you want. I've been in an environment where we've had applications that are extremely aggressive, like 5 minutes idle, 2 minutes disconnect, all the way to other applications that are 8 hours idle to, 2 hours disconnect thereafter. And then again, the challenge there, especially if you're in a cloud-based environment, to provide these two different timers is you actually need to spin up 2 different virtual machines, which costs you real money. Okay, so in this one, we're looking for 10 minutes and if the state is disconnected. And then what this will go through is this will run my control up automation action, log off session, and the other one is disconnect. And then I've got a second application where I've got different timers as well. Okay, so whereas the other one was 10 minutes and 20, this one is 5 minutes. And the log off timer is also 5 minutes. And you can see I'm also keying in on another property in order to target this specifically for an application. I can actually target within ControlUp the actual application name that is delivered from storefront. Very cool. So let's take a look at the scripts. Again, going back to as soon as you start automating, it feels like these things just get really, really simple. This is just a one-liner, like crazy. All we need is the user session and then what server they're on, but since it'll be running on the local server, you could put localhost, but I'm just passing my 2 parameters, the session ID and the computer that the user is operating off of. And then for the log off one, very simple, it's barely 2 words. The log off command with the
I wrote that one, Trent. This is mine.
Yeah, this is yours.
Yeah.
And this is a batch file. It doesn't have to be PowerShell. It could be anything you want. And then same thing for the argument, just doing the session ID. So this is crazy simple stuff. And as long as these parameters are passed through and then they're interpreted, they can be executed and actioned on. So I'm not going to have you guys sit through waiting about an hour or 2 hours for these users to start being idle and disconnected. So what I've done is I've actually got a pre-recorded video that shows this in action. And what we can see at this 14:17 mark, we've got this user element K. He's on 002 and he's already at the 19 minutes. So he's about to go into a 20-minute idle time, which will kick him into a disconnected state. And so the important thing to remember is he's on 002 and there's these other users on Meditech. So this particular user, he's also on 002 and they have different sets of timers. So we'll see this in action, 2 different sets of timers actually working on the same system. Okay, so after 20 minutes, he's now in the disconnected state. And his disconnected state will flip up to the 10-minute mark. And then we'll see him pop off.
Trent, we had a question pop up. If the user is, if they're using session sharing, this would log off all the apps from the particular session?
Yes.
I'm assuming a more comprehensive script would locate and correct the executable and kill it.
Yep, that's absolutely true. You could do something like that. Instead, you could go after an executable instead of just logging off the user. Yes, session sharing, because it'll be in that list of applications, it will be triggering on that. So, I mean, and in an environment where you have aggressive timers versus non-aggressive timers, and you're dealing with session sharing, that might be a desired result, right? To have a privacy application if you're launching it within your session to actually, actually log off. But yeah, you certainly could tweak it in order to just trigger on processes. Okay, and then we're gonna look at this second user here. And we're looking at a good man. So he is now at a disconnected state with 4 minutes. Sorry, he was on 006 and his disconnect idle timer was 5 minutes. And so now he gets kicked off. And these other users are on 006 too from hyperspace and they'll have the different timers. So now we have 2 different sets of timers operating on the same system and they're not targeted on the system and they're not even targeted on the users, they're targeted on applications. So this is a pretty cool use case. and very simple. Okay, so my next demo I'd like to give, so that's working on the metrics within ControlUp and whatnot. There is event-based automated actions too that ControlUp offers. And it is true, Windows does offer event-based automation within the task scheduler service, but I think the ControlUp event-based automated actions is actually much more powerful. I think it's much more simple. It's more intuitive. It's easier to configure, and we can actually pass parameters to the script, which I think makes it much more customizable and powerful. So I've actually, as I've been using ControlUp and as I've had it in my environment, I've found I have 2 events that keyed in that caused me some serious problems. One of it is the Citrix performance counters. Is this particular event, Citrix actually detects that its performance counters aren't operating, and it creates an event for you. It creates event 1052 and tells you to run this command. So very simple fix again, but the Citrix desktop service does not fix this for you, but we can use this event with ControlUp to actually key in and execute this simple script. The other event is I use AppV in my home lab here, and one of the things I found is for some reason, every so often a PVS system comes up and it doesn't load my AppV packages. And I found a correlation here. I found this particular event would be reported by the AppV scheduler service, and it would tell me the username or password is incorrect. When I started to debug and get into the root cause of this, I found that my machine wasn't having his group membership being applied. So this to me is a little bit crazy. I don't know what's going on in my lab, but I do know that these are PVS systems, so they should all be identical, but as we all know, that doesn't always happen. So what I can do then is I can actually key in on this event, refresh my group membership, and actually kick off AppV Scheduler to go and reload my packages again. And so let's take a look at what these look like. Okay, so as I'm bringing up the triggers console, I've got my 2 event IDs, it's just how I've named them. So one is refresh computer group membership. This will solve my AppV issue. And so if we look at the triggers that this keys in on, so this is, because this is an event-based action, anything within the event you can look at. So source is AppV Scheduler, event ID is 0. The message contains the word password and type equals to error. So you can increase that message to make it more specific, but I don't see any other reason to do that for this particular event. And then again, I've created a automated action that will refresh my computer group membership. And then for the Citrix one, it's the same thing. I've got some event ID 1052, the log is in the application, and the source is the Citrix desktop service. I know that 1052 event is always related to this particular issue. And so I've got an automated action to just rebuild performance counters, which is that exact same command that that we saw in the event. Okay, so now I can actually show the event too for the AppV script because it's actually more interesting. Okay, so I've got
one of the other questions that came in was, does the console need to be up in order for the triggers to fire off?
Great question. So the answer to that is no. This actually will operate as long as you've got a monitor running. So I've got my monitor running in the bottom left corner, and it'll actually be monitoring for these events and the metrics, and it's the one that actually kicks off all the automated actions. So in this particular script, we can see that I actually purge all my tickets. I tell the domain controller to refresh, and then I execute a group policy. In my script here, when I was playing with this and testing it, I actually wrote an event log just so I can see when the script was executing. And then finally, I actually execute my action to tell AppV Scheduler to deploy again. So we can actually demonstrate what that looks like. So I've simulated my failure scenario here. I tend to have, I've got one server, so 005, he's got no AppV packages loaded, whereas the rest of them are all perfectly healthy. So this is how you troubleshoot in the past. You'd select a whole bunch of systems, you'd run it, and you'd use the grouping mechanism within the script actions results pane in order to determine which system is having your problem. But now with automated actions, what will happen is I'm going to generate an event, and we'll actually see it pop up on the events view here.
While we're waiting, we had some more questions about the availability of the scripts library. It will be downloadable for whether it's on premise or in the cloud, and for all license levels.
Yeah, another great question. Do you want to take that, Yoni?
Yeah, I'll cover that. So first, regarding availability, the script library is already available for all the cloud customers, and all the suggestion rules we have shown before will be available to anyone upgrading to 7.4. We have an updated package in place also for on-premises customers. Currently, only for the new scripts. We still don't have a package for the rules for on-premises customers, but we're working on that. Now, in regards to the licensing question, running the scripts on demand is obviously part of the existing license, just like it was before 7.4. The new ControlUp automation module in 7.4 requires a separate license. Okay, so I don't have the exact details here. This is something our sales organization will work with existing customers, but I know that it will require an additional license.
Great, thanks. And now I've got two last use cases that I've been playing with that I think are super exciting. So with the ControlUp automation platform, because we use PowerShell, because we use Batch, because we use VBS, and these are APIs essentially, we can actually key into other services and help augment those products to help make them better. One of the first use cases I started playing with was Citrix session recording. As of one of the more recent releases, it actually has the ability for programs to start annotating additional information within your Citrix session recording. And what we can do with that is that we can actually key in on various metrics, so if the CPU is above a certain stress level and it's this particular process, or just the CPU is above a certain stress level, we can actually create an event so that way it's annotated within that product. So if I look at the triggers for this, and as well, I've also got another one that automatically kicks off session recording depending on a whole bunch of parameters that you can have within here. Application name, particular user, whether or not, if the CPU goes high, hey, we want to hit session recording because we want to actually see, what the user was doing in that time. But for these particular two, so I've got annotate disk and annotate CPU. And so if we look very simply, I'm targeting two specific users, and then I'm looking at their disk. If it's above a certain threshold, then it'll actually record using my script action that I've written already to annotate the Citrix session recording. So let's take a look at what this looks like. So if I'm looking at my sessions, I'm looking at A, good, low, and I'm actually just going to open session recorder for this session. Okay, and what it's going to do is I'm passing some parameters to session recorder, which will match up with one of the video files that it happens to have, and we can actually see all of these individual annotations for this particular user. So we can see what he was doing when he was under high CPU load. We can see what he was doing when he was under high disk stress, and so on and so forth. And one of the cool things about Citrix session recording is that it's live, so we can actually watch the user do his work, and actually these annotations will actually get pumped in by ControlUp as they're occurring, all in real time. So it goes back to that real-time nature of ControlUp and just the amazing capability and ability to help augment this. When you start looking at the other recordings within session recording without this annotation, it's barren. If a user were to tell you, I had a problem at some point in my 8-hour workday, you don't want to have to sit there and actually monitor that whole or watch that whole session to see if you can find out when that was. But with this, you can actually get much more precision as to what was occurring, when it was occurring, and the way to troubleshoot it. Okay, and then the last one is actually ServiceNow, and I am running a bit low on time, so I'm not going to show the script. But what we can do with ServiceNow is that because it's a PowerShell script, we can actually integrate into it as well. And with that, we can actually start pumping in through the API, through the REST API, incidents as we find that they're occurring. So for instance, if we find a logon duration has exceeded like 107 seconds, we've now automatically used the automation engine to pick up those metrics and send that into ServiceNow for creating an incident with all the relevant information that we need. So whether that's the additional user information, we can see the profile was a second, their user was 77 seconds, so probably there. They've got a GPO that took 88 seconds. So now we can really start looking at, very quickly, is there an issue within the environment that we can correlate, and we can use ServiceNow to help with that. So again, this is how ControlUp can augment another program or process within your organization to help give you more rich and more contextual information, so that way you can make a decision on how you want to proceed with the problem much, much faster. Okay, and then the last thing I'm happy to announce, ControlUp, what we're going to do here is we're putting on a contest. We're calling it Can You Script It? So if you can think of an awesome idea, and if you can at least cobble together some kind of script, batch, VBS, PowerShell, doesn't matter what, and it has the ability to tie in with our engine and solve some problems within the community, and essentially within the Citrix world or the VMware world or the RDSH world, you have the opportunity to win a $1,000 prize, and we'll be announcing the winner at Citrix Synergy. So here's the URL for this, https www.controlup.com. Can you script it? So I'm really excited to see what people come up with. And unfortunately, ControlUp employees are not a part of the contest, but I'm excited to see what the community does. And with that, I'm going to hand it back to Yoni.
Thanks, Trent. Appreciate it. I think it was a pretty impressive demo and a good, kind of a good summary of some of the things you can do with the automation platform. And again, it's in the end, the only limitation is our customers' imagination, right? Because if you think about it, it's a platform. We have the rich contextual triggering engine, and it's now connected to the script action, pretty much, infinite pool of scripts, whether internal or community-based. So I'm also really excited to see what the guys out there will submit. It's going to be great. As you have noticed, we will be at Synergy 2 or 3 weeks from now. We're going to be doing a breakout session. Trent and myself are going to cover this in more depth and some other stuff. So stay tuned for that. So before we wrap up, I want to quickly cover another new release we had actually early this week. So we have a new Insights version in place, 124, and this one was mainly about improving our backend to allow much faster queries, a shorter delay between the time the monitor service uploads data until you can actually work with it in Insights. And the other thing is we now keep 5-minute data for even up to 1 year, depending on your license, on Insights license. So I'm a live demo fan, so let's just see it in action. So this is our ControlUp demo organization. You can see now currently here back in Israel, the time is 8:55. It's 5 minutes to 9 p.m. And you can see here in session count, you can see that the last data point is 35 minutes. Last data point is from 35 minutes ago, which is pretty great. We are working on enhancing that for everyone. So we think we might be able even to drop it to 30 minutes in the next couple of weeks. So this is one thing which is a very big change from the previous Insights release. Another thing obviously is faster queries, and we'll let you be the judge of that. And finally, I have here an existing bookmark that will show me the CPU, RAM, and I/O usage for a specific server in my environment for the last month, for the last 30 days, okay? And in previous Insights versions, just like here, when we look on time frames longer than 24 hours, we can see a data point for every 1 hour, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. Now, sometimes we see a pretty high peak a while ago, whether it's a week ago, a month ago, and we do want to see some more granular data. We want to see exactly how, in this case, CPU behaved, but in a more granular way. So it's totally doable in 124. We can simply go ahead and select a much shorter time range. So I'm selecting 2 days, which will allow me to see the 5 minutes historical data. Okay, so we'll wait for the query to finish. And again, we have really enhanced query performance in 124. And now you can see the same peak, but now we see it with 5 minutes data points. Okay, and as usual, we can click on any historical data point, and ControlUp Insights will show us the top 5 processes causing the high CPU, RAM, or I/O issue at that same point. Okay, so go ahead, test drive 124. It's out there, it's live, and I think it's working really great. Okay, so Stephanie, or if you have any other questions from the audience, we can cover some of them now, and otherwise we can probably wrap up.
Yeah, there's a couple of questions. Does ControlUp have the ability to display information about Windows legal notice time impacts for logons?
Okay, that's a tricky question. I heard a few customers asking about that. So currently this is covered as part of the logon duration metric, but we can't really distinguish the time before and after a customer has actually acknowledged the legal caption, the legal notice. We are working with some of our experts on trying to find a way. So I would say, currently it's under investigation.
Thank you. And there's another, is there an audit trail for the automated actions?
Yes, for sure. So I haven't shown it. So yeah, we have actually 2 audit trails. One, which is mandatory, so it's happening always, is an event log entry, which will be recorded on the monitor service VM whenever it executes an automated action. So it will always be there in a central location, an event log entry with all the details. In addition to that, there is an optional email message that can be fired on a per trigger basis when we run an automated action. So yeah, for sure.
Excellent. One more question here. Are the extended dashboards coming to on-prem?
Okay, so I'm guessing the on-prem customers are referring to the new IOP 3.2 and the upcoming IOP 3.4 releases. And indeed, in 3.2 we have added the top insights reports in IOP. So it's actually on par with the online insights release. So now we have top insights in IOP. And in addition, in IOP 3.3, which is coming in, I think, a couple of weeks, we also added the sizing recommendation report to IOP. So both of these highly anticipated reports indeed made their way into the on-premises insights version.
Excellent, thank you.
Great, so guys, I really want to thank you for being with us. Hopefully you have enjoyed this webinar and the new features. Hoping to see many of you at Synergy. Feel free to contact us again to support if you guys want to join the upcoming 7.4 beta, which will start next week. And have a great day.
All right, and I just have a couple of items before we close out. For those of you who are coming to Synergy, we hope that you'll sign up for the CUGC pregame reception. It's a great way to kick off the week. Just visit mycugc.org, and I put a link in the chat to the CUGC at Synergy page. On that page, you'll find where to sign up for the pregame. There's also a link to pass discounts if you haven't purchased your Synergy pass yet. We do have a discount for CUGC members, so please go check that out, and make sure you come visit us in the Community Hub in Synergy Park. And one last thing before we wrap up. I know some of you opted in when you registered for a chance to win an Apple Watch. So after the webinar, ControlUp will randomly select the lucky winner and we will notify you, and we will tweet that person's name out as soon as we know it, and also list it on mycugc.org. So be sure to follow us on Twitter at mycugc and use the hashtag mycugc when you want to get our attention. So I think with that, we've covered everything for today. If there were questions that didn't get answered, I will make sure I pass those on to Yoni and Trent and get some answers, and I'll include a link to a forum thread in the follow-up email that you guys will get, and hopefully we'll have some answers for those then. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, Yoni and Trent. Hopefully I can get answers from you guys. But I will send those over to you as soon as we wrap up today.
For sure.
Awesome, thank you. All right, everyone, I hope you have a great day. Thank you again, Yoni and Trent. Thank you, Jenny, for keeping an eye on those questions. And thank you to everyone who attended today. Hope you all have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you.